Okay, so thank you. Oh, thank you, Kim, for introducing me. Again, my name is Monica Romo. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I work for Girasol, which is part of the Texas Institute for Child and Family Wellbeing, which is part of the school, Steve Hill School of Social Work at the University of Texas in Austin. And today I'm going to be presenting about our program, the Mental Health Collaborative. But just a little bit about Girasol and what we do, who we are. Uh, Girasol was launched after a couple of years of volunteer work in the family detention centers that we used to have here in the state of Texas. So in 2018, it became more organized and an actual program within the institute. And we started off really focusing on providing support not only to the women and children that were detained at in the centers, but also the professionals, primarily legal professionals that were going into the centers to provide legal services to those families. Our mission is to provide trainings, consultation, and resources to build a network of trauma-informed professionals that support immigrant families. And our vision is a global community that prioritizes the mental health and well-being of all immigrant families. We do this through our three program areas, our trainings and consulting program, where we provide professional trainings and consultation, again, to legal, social service, and mental health professionals that work with immigrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. We also have our social work detention response team, where we provide primarily social work students, but also some of the law students and other students that are interested in immigration work with opportunities for both volunteer work and advocacy. And then, of course, we have the Mental Health Collaborative, which is what I'm going to be talking to you guys more about today. Um, Before we begin, just a little disclaimer here that the views and opinions that I'm going to talk about today in our presentation do not necessarily reflect those of the Steve Hicks School of Social Work or the University of Texas. So just a little disclosure there. Our objectives for today, I'm going to talk about the history and the rationale for the Mental Health Collaborative. I'm going to review our model and our process, describe how we use volunteers, and then summarize the impact of our work over the last 4 years. So to begin, just to kind of, I keep saying mental health collaborative, right? And to kind of explain what that is. Basically, in a nutshell, the mental health collaborative is a coordination system that we use to connect immigration attorneys with mental health professionals to provide mental health evaluations to support the cases of their clients. So we do that through training qualified mental health professionals. So we recruit licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, LMFTs, licensed marriage and family therapists, we're open to working with any licensed mental health professional, and we provide training so that they can develop the skills to both, interview the immigrant clients and also write the reports that are actually used by the legal team to support those legal cases. So we really take a lot of pride in the system that we have built to support the mental health professionals that get involved in this work. We try to offer continuing education opportunities for them. So not only the initial training, but follow-up training opportunities. For example, earlier this year, we had a training specifically talking about, what it's like to be called to testify for one of these cases. So we had a speaker that has a lot of experience in that work come and do a training, and those folks that participated were able to obtain continuing education credits for that. We actually also provide a lot of samples and templates that people can use, not only of what the letters look like, but also assessment tools that are needed and that can be used to support the diagnoses and the symptoms that people are having. We also offer a free consultation group where folks can come in and not only talk about the cases that they're working on for the mental health collaborative, but even cases that they might be working on outside of the mental health collaborative. And I'm also available for one-on-one consultation with the members of the collaborative. And one of our big goals in developing the mental health collaborative is to design a model that is not only replicable, but also scalable, not only within Texas, but in communities nationwide. And that's something that I'll be talking a little bit more about later on in the presentation. But why did we, oh, sorry. So the history. The history is, as I mentioned, the whole idea of Girasol came after Ana Hernandez, who was the original person that kind of created this program. She was a student at UT and she started to organize other social work students and some legal law students and other students that wanted to do immigration work. So they started to organize these group of students to go into the detention centers to again just provide like support groups to the women and children that were there. And as we started doing that, the legal professionals started to approach us to, kind of say, hey, do you know anyone that does mental health evaluations that, we can refer to because, we have this case, it's asylum seeker. So it kind of started kind of informally where we just started like connecting those attorneys with people within the institute and within UT and other universities in Austin that were mental health professionals to provide these evaluations. And so as that kept happening, it really opened up our eyes to the fact that there's just a systemic gap, right? Um, there's not a lot of availability for these evaluations. Also, the folks that do offer these evaluations out in the community, it tends to be very expensive. These evaluations range from like $600 to like $1,500. So of course, that's not realistic for, the people that were in detention centers. They definitely could not afford that. So we decided to come up with an idea, right? Let's do something um, to address this gap. So at that time, we decided to talk to Raíces, to their team to see what we could come up with. And so we designed a model, we partnered with Raíces, and in the pilot year, which we started, the idea came about in like 2018. By 2019, the end of 2019 is when we kind of started to launch the program. And in that first year, we trained 72 professionals, mental health professionals, to conduct evaluations, and we coordinated 40 assessments. So we felt very proud of that. In 1 year, we were able to, have an impact on 40 different cases. So again, why did we want to do this, right? So as you all probably know, asylum grant rates are very low. The research I was doing for this, I think last year was only the average was 14.4% nationwide, which is, very low. And there has been some research conducted that does show that when cases have a mental health evaluation submitted with like the evidence, it does tend to have a positive impact, and cases are 2 times more likely to be approved when they include an evaluation. So um, that, along with seeing the systemic gap that we were seeing, we really felt that this was needed. Of course, throughout the last almost 5 years that we've been doing this work, um, the mo the ma- I would say all of our clients, however, I don't have the specific data, but I feel comfortable saying that, the majority of the clients that we work with fall below the 200% poverty guidelines. And so again, these evaluations are very expensive. So without this service, people would just not be able to afford it. Um, it also, benefits clients. Something that we have seen is that a lot of times the clients that we work with, they've never had the opportunity to talk about, what's happened to them or the symptoms that they're experiencing with a mental health professional. And it really helps them to gain an understanding of, why they are experiencing what they're experiencing. It also helps them to feel validated. Sometimes, it also helps with reducing that stigma that a lot of these people tend to have because of the cultures and the backgrounds that they come from, where there's just a lot of stigma in regards to mental health symptoms or, just experiencing any kind of uncomfortable feeling, right? So a lot of times we see that people feel uh, just seen and validated. And of course, a part of the evaluation is to provide treatment recommendations. And so sometimes, we are able to tell people that, we highly recommend that they receive therapy or that they seek a medical evaluation or something that can be really helpful for them in regards to, how to take better care of their mental health and how to help them cope better with the symptoms that they're experiencing. So since 2019, kind of a breakdown of the cases that have been referred to us. The majority of the cases that we have worked on have been those for adults. So 103 out of 130 cases, I believe, have been adult clients. We've also done a few cases for teen clients, so between the ages of 13 and 17. A few children, only 5 cases over the last 4 years. And we have also worked with 2 family units. Most of the cases that are referred to us are asylum cases. So 66% of the cases that we've worked on since 2019 have been asylum cases. We've also worked on U visa cases, VAWA, T visas, and a few other cases. We've done a few hardship cases. We've done a couple of evaluations to support SIJS cases or stitches. And so, again, the majority of the clients are adults and they're seeking asylum, but we do train our evaluators to conduct a wide range of assessments, not only for asylum. And of course, language, right? That's the last presentation talked a lot about language. So of course, the majority of the clients that we worked with, because we have primarily worked in Texas, right? We do know that the majority of the folks in Texas that are in the detention centers here, or that tend to, the large immigrant communities that we have in Texas, a lot of them are Spanish speaking. So the majority of the cases that we have worked on have been Spanish speaking. So 101 out of 130 have been clients that speak Spanish. 17 cases have requested or have needed different languages. We've worked with uh, clients that speak Haitian Creole or Russian, indigenous Mayan languages. And 12 other clients that we've worked with have either been primarily English speakers or have been very proficient in English, where the evaluation was able to be conducted in English. So a huge part of our network, almost half of the people in our network are actually fluent Spanish speakers that, fluent enough to where they feel comfortable completing an evaluation in Spanish. So currently 48% of the people in our collaborative speak Spanish. We also, of course, do work with interpreters. Um, Sometimes, in most of the cases that we've had, when the client is referred to us and they don't speak a language that we have an evaluator that speaks that language, the legal team has already been working with the client and already has like an established relationship with an interpreter. And so we are able to use that same interpreter to complete the evaluation. We just make sure that, we connect them with the mental health professional and that the mental health professional feels comfortable working with an interpreter. Um, but in a few cases, we have worked on cases where there was not an interpreter already established. And so we do have a partnership with Response Crisis Translation when we do need an interpretation. So if you guys are not familiar with Response Crisis Translation, I highly recommend that you look them up. They're an amazing organization that provides trauma-informed interpretation and translation services. So we partner with them for interpretation. And of course, we want to make sure that we're not creating a financial burden for the client. So we always make sure that we are able to either cover the cost or the legal team can cover the cost so that we don't have to end up having to charge the client for that service. Um, I put a picture of a parrot here because um, one thing that we've learned as we are training mental health professionals in doing this work is that a lot of the mental health professionals that we train have never worked with clients that don't speak English or their language. And so we've actually had to incorporate, how to work with an interpreter as part of the training that we do. And so one of the things that I tell people is that when you work with an interpreter, it's like you have a parrot on your shoulder, right? Because, I'm guilty of this. I hate to admit it, right? But I remember when I first started working with clients that didn't speak English or Spanish like me, and I would use an interpreter, I would always say, I would always talk to the interpreter instead of the client, and I would say, tell the client this, instead of just talking to the client and having the interpreter, repeat back. So the way that I've been able to kind of tell people is just pretend that you have a parrot on your shoulder and you're just talking to that client, and then the parrot is going to repeat what you say. So that's why I put that picture there. Um, Talking more about the mental health collaborative model. So one thing that is really important for our model is that although we do work with volunteers, uh, it is really important. One thing that is really important for us is that we are able to pay the mental health professional for their work. Um, we have worked really hard over the last 4 years to not have to ask people to do free labor, because we do believe in economic justice and the value that they're providing, for the legal case is just, it's really, really great. And so we do always try to find sources to pay. So we provide a stipend. It's definitely not as high as what, again, people in the, mental health professionals in the community make from doing these evaluations, but we provide a $300 stipend for every evaluation. And so these are some of the funders that we have worked with over the last 4 years. So the Texas Bar Foundation has funded our program for 2 years. Raices, we continue to have a partnership with them. And then also the City of Austin Equity Office has also provided 2 years of funding for the work that the Mental Health Collaborative does. So we're really grateful for that funding. Um, how do we recruit mental health professionals? When we first started, it was really kind of, who did we know, right? Who was already kind of connected to Girasol. So it was a lot of professors, social work professors, not only at UT, but also at other universities in the Austin area. And so we kind of just reached out to them, and they were reaching out to their networks of, professionals, mental health professionals that they knew. And, that's kind of like how we started. We also, at that time, were training a lot of students who were very interested in doing the work after they graduated. So we trained them as students, and then as they got out into the professional world, and they got licensed, then they actually, got really involved. One of our most active members has been part of the collaborative since the very beginning. Like, she got trained as a student, and now, she's, 5 years into her career, and she continues to volunteer. So even now, a lot of the folks that come to our trainings and that we recruit are referred by their colleagues. It's really been very inspiring to see how many people actually want to do this work and just don't know how to get involved. And, because I feel that for a lot of professionals out in the community that want to be connected to immigration work, they just really don't know how to get connected. And so, they hear about it from a colleague, and they contact us, and then they're like, hey, I want to get involved in this work. We also advertise our trainings, of course, on Eventbrite, on our newsletter, and through our social media. We don't have Girasol social media platforms, but through the institute, we do have social media, so we advertise it there. And we offer our trainings um, every 3 months, so quarterly. And we always, have a very good turnout. We train about 40, I would say like an average of 40 to 46 people um, every 3 months. And most of the people that come to our training do sign up for the collaborative, but they don't have to sign up. And I always, let them know that, they're more than welcome to join the training, and they do not have to, join the collaborative. But most people that come to the training do join the collaborative. So currently, who's in the collaborative? So the majority of the folks that are in the collaborative are clinical social workers. So 63% of our collaborative members are clinical social workers or licensed master social workers that are under clinical supervision. We have 59 licensed professional counselors. We have 9 LMFTs, 3 psychologists, and 1 psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. We also, so these are just the folks that we have in Texas, um, but we also have people that are outside of Texas. So we have 43 evaluators who are licensed. For example, I know we have folks in California, New Mexico, Georgia, in North Carolina, and a few other states that I just can't think of the top of my head. But we also, do open our training to folks outside of Texas. Um, we do let them know that, they're welcome to come to the training. The chances that we'll be able to match them to a case are, not huge right now because all of our funding is really focused in the state of Texas. But every once in a while, we'll get a request for a client that had been living in Texas and their attorney, reaches out to us and is like, hey, the client moved to Georgia. Do you have anybody? And, we're able to connect them in that way. So, as I said, one of our big goals in creating the mental health collaborative is to make it replicable because we want this model. We don't have the mentality of, this is ours and we want to keep it. No, we want to decrease the gap, right? We want to make that gap in services smaller. And one of the ways is by making our model replicable, right? So it's a quite a simple model, right? What we need is partnerships between mental health professionals and legal organizations. And then, of course, as I said earlier, being able to pay people for their labor is really important to us. So finding sources of funding. And as I'm sure, all of us know that work in the nonprofit world, that tends to be one of the biggest difficulties, right? Finding funding sources. As I said, we've been lucky that we have found consistent sources of funding for the last 4 years, but that tends to be the challenge, right? Um, it's also really important that, we form partnerships with legal organizations that are trusted in the community, right? Because I'm sure all of us know that there's a lot of, notarios and other legal people, people that, can either attorneys that are kind of like using predatory practices and just people that are not even attorneys, right? That are taking advantage of these folks, of immigrants because of, the lack of awareness of, how the legal system works in the US. So we really think it's really important to partner with organizations that we know are trusted and legitimate. And then the mental health professionals that we recruit and that we train, we also want to make sure that, they're not, that they are trauma informed, that they are, practicing from a standpoint of cultural humility, because there is so much cultural issues play a huge role in how people function in the world and how trauma shows up for them. And so we really try to have a focus on those two pieces, being trauma informed and being, culturally humble when we do our trainings. We are always happy to train organizations to create their mental health collaboratives. Last year we did train an organization in the Midwest. I can't remember what state right now, but we did train an organization in the Midwest that was interested in developing their own mental health collaborative. So if your organization or any organization that you're aware of might be interested in, developing a model like this, we're always happy to consult and to talk about it and to support the work. So the actual, coordination process, right? So how does it work? Once we, form these partnerships and we have the mental health professionals that are trained and we have the legal professionals referring cases to us, what happens, right? So it seems like quite a lengthy process, but it's again not. It's kind of it's simple. The first thing, right, is after we form the partnerships, is that we do have a referral process. So the legal team submits a case, and we use Qualtrics. And I'll talk a little bit more about referral form in a minute. But we get that referral submitted to us. I review that referral, and what I do is that I take out any identifiable information, and whatever information I receive about the case, I simplify it, I de-identify it, and then I send out a request to our network saying, hey, we have a request for an asylum case. This is an adult, and these are some of the critical facts about the case. Um, I send that out once a mental health professional accepts the case. So I send it to the whole network, or maybe not the entire network, but the network, the members of the network that fit into the criteria, right? So for example, if it's an adult case, I only send it to mental health professionals that work with adults. Uh, there are times, for example, that the attorney requests a native Spanish speaker, right? Because maybe the client is not super comfortable working with interpreters. Maybe there's been issues with interpretation in the past. So they'll request, a native Spanish speaker. So I'll make sure that when I send my request, that those things are clear. Once a mental health professional accepts the case, um, I set up the case on our online platform, which is called Basecamp. It's a co-working platform that we use, and we use that online platform in order to keep everything contained in one space, right? Because we are going to now be sharing the client's information, such as their name and their contact information. And of course, once the evaluation report is written, that's also going to be shared. So we want to make sure that all that information is being protected, and it's not just like being shared over email or any other kind of like not secure platform. So we use all the communication goes on platform. Um, so the next step then is for the mental health professional and the legal team. So most of the time it's an attorney, but it can also be, a legal assistant, a qualified representative. Sometimes it's a law student. And so we connect the mental health professional and that legal person for them to have an initial phone call where they can, explain more about the needs of the case. And from there, the mental health professional kind of like takes over. They contact the client directly, and they set up the evaluation. So, they set up the time to meet with the client, where they're going to meet with the client, whether it's going to be in person or like a telehealth session. Um, how, they are kind of establishing contact with the client, and keeping in mind all of those things that were mentioned in the last presentation in regards to, the client might have a very difficult schedule because they work a lot of long hours or they work every day. So we really do ask the mental health professionals to be flexible when working with our clients, because they tend to, not have great work schedules, so great availability, right? Once a mental health professional, interviews the client, has all the information they need, they write the report. And once that report is written, then they again upload it back into that Basecamp platform, where it is reviewed by both myself and the legal team. And we provide feedback, request any corrections to be made. Um, Sometimes there's information that needs to be taken out because it's not relevant to the case. So all of that happens, and then the report is finalized, and then it is like signed by the mental health professional and again uploaded to Basecamp. And that's pretty much the end of the process. At that point, I kind of take over again, and we make sure that that mental health professional is paid their stipend, and that, the attorney has a copy of the report, and the case is kind of terminated as far as, our mental health collaborative process. So, one of the things that we really try to be very clear about is what the role of the mental health professional is when they're as part of the mental health collaborative, right? So we do this in our training when we're training the mental health professionals, but also when we are connecting with the legal team, right? Because a lot of times we know, right, that a lot of the clients that are being seen in, a lot of our immigrant clients, they are needing therapy, right? They're needing more than just an evaluation. They're needing ongoing support. And so we try to be very clear about the fact that in this capacity, we are evaluators rather than therapists. We are definitely using our therapeutic skills and our clinical skills, but in a different way, right? We are using them in the role of an evaluator. Um, we are tasked with, educating on issues that are not like understood by people outside of, mental health professionals, right? So I think that for folks that, legal folks that have been doing immigration work for a long time, I think I'm always very surprised, very happily surprised that there is like uh, an awareness of the effects of trauma, right? And there's an understanding of what can happen to a person after they experience something horrible, right? But that's not the case, for every legal professional. That's not the case for all immigration attorneys or adjudicators, right? So one of the things that we really do in our evaluations is to educate about how trauma changes people's functioning, right? How it shows up as symptoms. For children, a lot of times it shows up as behavior. And for adults as well, right? So that's a huge part of what the evaluation focuses on explaining on, how this thing that happened to the client, this really traumatic experience that they had, how it's showing up for them, what symptoms they are experiencing, why their behavior might seem odd or, uh, erratic. Um, why they might be engaging in certain high risk behavior. So we really try to explain how that is all due to the trauma that occurred. We also sometimes have to discuss cultural differences. Um, so really talking about, how, for example, eye contact can be one thing, right? In our US society, we are very much into like eye contact. Like eye contact, we have a lot of value, right? And eye contact. We think that if people don't make eye contact with us, they're, not being truthful or they're trying to hide something. But in a lot of cultures, like I'm thinking about, indigenous cultures and other cultures around the world, eye contact is viewed very differently, right? And so we might talk about that, right? Like this client might not be making eye contact because culturally this is what happens, right? Um, Also, other things, for example, one case that we had, and I can't remember exactly what like the legal thing about the case was, but basically we were working with a client who was from the Dominican Republic, and she had somewhere along in her immigration process, she checked off a box where it said that she was married, but in fact, she was not legally married. However, culturally, in the place where she lived, it was a common practice, as it is in many places around the world, for um, an older man to come to show up at your house and say, I want to marry you. And I think at the time she was like 14 or 15 years old, and basically her family said, sure, take her. And so like the way that they called it is se la llevaron, right? They took her or he took her. And in their culture, like you're married, like now you are, a spouse to this person. However, there's like not a legal process at all, right? And this became very relevant in the case. And so we had to do an evaluation where we were not only talking about trauma, but also that cultural difference, right? That in her mind, she checked off that box that she was married because culturally she viewed it as a marriage. However, legally it was not a marriage. So that's just an example of cultural differences that might come up. But a huge thing, right, that we do in an evaluation, and that's why I really try to drive home that point of we are evaluators. We're not the therapists in this particular role, is that we are tasked with providing an unbiased, informed, and professional opinion. Um, a lot of times when people conduct these evaluations, uh, if they have been working with the client, like if they are doing therapy with the client, I think it becomes it opens up questions of whether this therapist is invested in the client's well-being, and therefore their recommendation or their opinion might be biased, right? Because they're invested in this person's well-being. In the role of evaluator, I really discourage folks from doing evaluations for clients that they've been working with long term, because we don't want to open up that possibility of, their opinion. Try to focus on providing information supporting our recommendation, right? So I make it a huge thing about, I tell people like, I need you to really explain why we should believe you, right? So really like outlining the symptoms that this person is having, outlining the difficulties in functioning that this person is having, so that when we get to that point where we're not only like possibly making a diagnosis, but giving a recommendation, we've already given you all the information as to why. Um, so that's really important. The legal professional's role, again, I say legal professionals because it can be an attorney, a legal assistant, a law student. Um, it's really important that when people when legal professionals refer cases to the mental health collaborative, that they know that this isn't just something where they're just going to refer a case and then it's going to be over. Like, we're really ask them to be involved in the process, not only at the beginning of the process when they're sending the referral, by clearly presenting the key facts of the case that we need to be aware of in order to make sure that we are looking at those things where we're doing the evaluation. But we also really ask them that, to make sure that the client has consented to, even being referred or to being open to talk to an evaluator. Um, there's only been a few cases in the past 4 years where, we've had the mental health evaluator reach out to the client, and the client is like, I have no idea why you're contacting me. Like, my attorney didn't talk to me about this. Um, so we really do ask, that the process is explained to the client and that they are, open to that. We do also ask them to be available to answer questions and to clarify information throughout the process. And of course, to review the report once it's completed, and to provide feedback. Most of the time there's feedback. There's a few times where, the um, eh, attorney or legal professional reads the report and they're just like, oh, I don't have any feedback. This looks great. Thank you very much. Most of the time there's, some feedback, and we appreciate that, right? Um, so I had talked about earlier about our referral form. And so I always like to talk about this because I know that doing this work, we tend to be very protective of our clients' information. And even when I'm talking to attorneys about, sending this information, there's always like a lot of like resistance and like, but why do you need to know that, right? Because we want to protect our clients. So um, this is basically what we ask for in the referral, right? Of course, the legal team's contact information. So a lot of times it's just one person, so like an immigration attorney, but there's times where, it's an immigration attorney and then maybe they have a law student working on the case as well, or a legal assistant. Also, we do have cases when they're referred to by organizations that kind of have adopted the holistic model of having legal and social services. A lot of times, we also can include like the case manager on the case, or the social worker, because they might be very familiar with the client and might be very involved. And so we also, allow that, right? Because we do believe that that's also very valuable. Uh, we do ask for the client's information, and so we ask for their name and their contact information, and of course, a few critical facts. So we don't need you to, tell us everything about the case, but a few things that we need to know in order to do a good evaluation, right? So what type of cases? Is this a VAWA case? Is it a U visa, an asylum case? And then, specifically what it might be. So, an example could be, client is from Guatemala and they come from an indigenous village and they're fleeing due to, um, state violence because of their indigenous identity or something like that, right? So very brief, but we can get a lot of information from that, right? And of course, the due date. We do ask that. when people are referring cases that we have a minimum of 30 days. But really 30 to 90 days is what we have found is the best. When we first started the collaborative, we were getting referrals for cases that, we had like a year to work on them. And what we found is that a lot of times either, we would start off and get really excited about the case, and then just like time would go by and people would forget about the case. Like the mental health evaluator just kind of forgot about the case because it was so long. Or they would jump on the case, do the evaluation right away, and then, a year later, the information was no longer accurate. So there was like a need for a second evaluation. So we have found that like 90 days is like 30 to 90 days is like a good amount of time to have. Um, the Qualtrics form, so Qualtrics is a paid platform, right? So we're not, it's secure. It's not something that is just like out on the internet, like, I don't know, like a Google form or, a Microsoft form. It's totally protected because we do understand how sensitive information that is being shared is, and we are wanting to keep it private. Um, the only people that have access to that is myself and my supervisor. We do not, allow anybody like else to have access to that Qualtrics form, that referral system. Um, and because we are part of the University of Texas, the Qualtrics is an IRB approved research tool, right? So it's very, very legitimate and secure. As far as Basecamp, which I've also talked about, this is basically what Basecamp is. This is a platform that we use. We have it set up to, we have a mental health collaborative. So when mental health professionals complete our training and they do decide to join the collaborative, they get invited to join this platform. And here, uh, is not only where they'll be able to connect with the attorneys, but also where they'll find a lot of the resources that we offer. So as you can see, like down here, we have documents and files. So here we have like a database of articles that are relevant to these evaluations. We have sample letters. We have a chat room where people can connect. We have a message board, so I tend to post about, upcoming events that we have. As I said, we have continuing education opportunities and all of that. And then we also have therapy resources. So after somebody completes an evaluation, a lot of times clients, it opens them up to the possibility of wanting to do therapy. So we have started to be able to provide kind of like a referral list of folks that are in the collaborative that are now also open to seeing clients pro bono or low bono. Um, and so that is just, it's like a referral. It's not something that we coordinate or anything. We just basically have a list of people that are open to receiving referrals. Uh, the actual case, so when somebody does refer a case, so the legal team refers a case, we create an actual case within Basecamp. So every case has a case number, so this is a sample one. But we use a message board feature where we again provide the information about the client. So this is where we will, for the first time, actually tell the evaluator, the name of the client, their date of birth, their contact information, and then the actual like critical facts of the case. And they will use this message board to communicate back and forth with the attorneys or the legal team about the case. This is also where they upload their evaluation. So again, we really discourage people from like sending evaluations over email or, Slack. We really want them to use this platform because we want to make sure that all that information is securely stored. Um, so the actual assessments, so what I mean by assessment is, the time that the mental health evaluator spends with the client. It can take anywhere from 2 to 8 hours, depending on the case. Uh, we have worked not so much in the last couple of years, but in the past, we've worked with a lot of clients that were in detention. So, of course, the time that we were able to talk to the client was very limited. But for cases of folks that are out in the community, it's typically at least a 2-hour session. Um, Also, this is not a psychiatric evaluation or a psychological testing evaluation, right? So I always want to be very transparent about the fact that, we are not doing competency capacity evaluations. We are not able to provide IQ testing. So a lot of times when attorneys or legal teams have concerns in regards to their clients, intellectual functioning and things like that, we are not really able to provide those evaluations. Um, Although we do have a few psychologists on our collaborative, um, it's not something that we regularly provide. And also, again, we do want to be very transparent too, right? That the legal staff, we might reach out to you in case that we need to consult on something. So there's times where, especially with like asylum cases, it's a little bit difficult for the evaluator to establish the like nexus or talking about, how does this client's identity, relate to the victimization. So we might need to consult with the legal staff about that. So the reports, most of the reports that we provide are reports that are, of course, discussing history, so trauma history, and then the symptoms that they're having. Many of the reports that we provide have a diagnosis, but not every report. There's times where the evaluator doesn't feel comfortable with providing a diagnosis after, one session with a client, or there's just not enough information to support a diagnosis. Um, and a few times, we work with cases where the client is just unable to participate in the interview, right? Because their trauma is their coping mechanism is avoidance and shutting down or dissociating. Uh, so there's times where we have to write a report in regards to why this client is not unable to talk, it's unable to talk about their trauma, right? Which is very relevant when if your client has to testify or go to court, right? And they're going to shut down in front of a judge. It might be really helpful to have an evaluation from a mental health professional saying, hey, this might happen and this is why. So to request an assessment, so if your organization is interested in sending a client over for an evaluation, we do require that clients are working with an attorney, right? So we avoid working with clients that are kind of like, working on their case without representation because we are not attorneys. We are not, there's a lot of the legal pieces that we might not understand. So we really want to be working with clients that have an attorney that's going to review the evaluation and make sure that, it's going to help the case. We do also, we want to provide this service to those folks that can't afford it, right? So, if you have if you're working with a client that it's doing well and has financial resources, that might not be the best client to refer. And of course, the client has to have provided consent, and so they have to be on board with getting an evaluation. And just, the attorney has to agree to follow the mental health procedure, the mental health collaborative processes. So, being available for consultation, being willing to, answer questions and review the report. So the impact of the mental health collaborative. So we so far over the last almost 5 years, we have partnered with 9 legal nonprofits organizations in Texas. We have facilitated 22 training workshops for mental health professionals. And we currently have over 193 mental health professionals in our network. And we have coordinated over 100 evaluations so far. So we've had 130 cases. We have partnered with organizations, again, not only started off in Austin, then we kind of like expanded it to Texas. And we're currently working with 2 organizations that are not in Texas. We're working with 2 organizations from California. So that's really exciting because we are seeing this making an impact not only in our community, but, having a wider impact. We are currently in the process of doing a program evaluation. Again, we are part of a research institute. So program evaluation is something that we do regularly, and it's very important for us. So the purpose of our program evaluation, is we want to track the outcomes of the cases that we worked on, to hopefully continue to build an evidence base that demonstrates that mental health evaluations have a positive impact on the outcome of legal cases. And we are always wanting to improve our process, right? So some of the ways that we have improved in over the last 4 years is, for example, as I shared, we used to just take referrals for, you know, any case that was due at any time. Now we've figured out, oh, 30 to 90 days is better. We've really have learned the importance of continuing to provide continuing education to the mental health evaluators. So not only doing the one-time training, but inviting folks to participate in trainings for specific types of evaluation. So for example, every couple of months, we provide mini trainings to kind of reinforce what we provide in the big, mental health evaluation training that we do every 3 months. So we invite folks to these groups where we just talk about, like, for example, the last one we had was on T visa cases. So we just talk about, what does a T visa evaluation look like? We really focus on, answering questions about T visas, things like that. So continuing to provide support for evaluators is really important. And that is actually the end of my presentation. Uh, I am able to provide for any mental health professional. So, FTs, LPCs, we are able to provide 1 hour of CEU credit through UT School of Social Work. So feel free to fill out this form and I will make sure that you receive a certificate. And also, just if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer anything. I think I have about 10 more minutes.
And Monica, I see that there are a few questions in the Q&A function. I don't know if you're able to
Okay.
see those.
Mhm. Oh,
If not,
yeah.
if not, we can read them out.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, the first question I see is about requiring LCSWs. We do allow LMSWs or LPC associates, I believe. LMSWs or LPC, I always forget if it's associates or interns, but as long as they're under clinical supervision, we do allow them to be part of the collaborative. Um, yes, I'm reading the rest of the questions. Yes, under supervision. We do also, I mean, we have LMSWs and like social work counseling students come to our training all the time, and we are totally, open to that because, a lot of the time students or LMSWs again want to come to the training because they want to learn to see if that's something that they're going to be interested in doing in the future. So we're always open to having them participate in our training.
And Monica,
Uh,
do you mind
yes.
reading the full question before answering as well? Just because I don't think
Okay.
everybody can see them.
Okay. Says, in your program, do you require to be an LCSW or do you also allow LMSWs or LPMHCs to do evals? I am attorney and my understanding is that LMSWs and LPC LMHCs need to practice under supervision. In New York, we have a similar program we work with to support cases, but there is a new administrator trying to increase evaluation recruitment. In recruitment, I was wondering if any of your Raíces partners have flagged any issues with non-LCSW, such as IJ giving the evaluation less evidentiary weight. I have been made aware personally of cases from the collaborative where that has happened, where, for example, an LMSW under supervision has provided an evaluation and the IJ or adjudicator has given it less weight. I have heard of that happening outside of the mental health collaborative, but luckily we haven't had that happen within the mental health collaborative. Um, However, for example, anytime that, I have a case referred and it's the evaluator that wants to take the case is an LMSW under supervision, or in Texas, I don't believe in Texas we have LPMHCs, but in Texas we have LPCIs, I believe, interns, which are the folks that have completed their graduate program but are still requiring their hours for full licensure. So anytime I get one of these evaluators that is not fully licensed, I let the attorney know and I ask, is that okay? Are you okay with this LMSW who is under clinical supervision to do the evaluation? Most of the time, the attorneys say yes. There's been a few times where the attorney's like, with this case, I'm really more comfortable with a fully, licensed professional. So it's almost like case by case. And I have a hard time giving a definitive answer because, as far as I know, like USCIS doesn't have a written rule in regards to, what type of licensure you need to have to do these evaluations. So it kind of like leaves it open for interpretation. And then another questions, do you have a date for your next quarterly evaluator training? I don't have a specific date, but it's going to be in November. So the best way to find out when our next training will be is for you to sign up for our newsletter, because we always, send out a notification through our newsletter. Or you can also, if you use Eventbrite, you can just follow us on Eventbrite and you'll be notified, of when our next training is, but it'll be in November. The next question is, who oversees the mental health collaborative process and how? Example, making sure a case moves along or keeping the legal mental health professionals accountable. So that's me. I oversee the process, as far as, receiving the referral, sending out the request, connecting the evaluator with the legal professional. And that is why I always encourage people to use Basecamp to communicate, because we have had a few cases where the attorney and the mental health professional have started to communicate through email, and then I don't know where the case is. And so that's why I'm always like kind of going back to Basecamp and saying, hey guys, like I'm tagging people and saying, hi, can you please give me a case update? So it's me, who is keeping track of all that. What about Texas OMSWs? Okay, advanced practitioners. So I don't think, um, again, there's not a written rule, but from my understandings, AP, this is like, I think this is the old licensure where now it's equivalent to an independent practitioner. And I don't believe that under that licensure, you are qualified to do independent mental health assessments. So I would answer that question with probably not. But Sylvia, if you have different information, because I'm not fully, I don't feel like I have a full understanding of the AP. I'm just basing it on the little that I know. So if Sylvia, if you know some more information or want to discuss offline, feel free to reach out to me and we can talk about that if that is something that you're interested in doing. And then the next question, psychiatrists to do letters for immigration? Some of our survivors needs for this letter. Usually a licensed counselors give letters for WAWA and I-751 waivers. Okay, so I believe in, please let me know if I'm not understanding correctly, if we have psychiatrists to do letters. Um, we don't currently have psychiatrists in our collaborative. We have, we are actually talking to a group of psychiatrists from the Dell Medical School at UT Austin that are very interested in immigration work, and want to be involved. So we are trying to figure out how to, involve psychiatrists, because there is a specific type of case, which I can't, it's like a medical certification or something like that. I can't remember what it was, that they do require for an MD, so a psychiatrist to do the evaluation. Um, so we don't do that currently as part of the mental health collaborative, but I do know of, some medical schools, for example, um, the UT Medical School has an asylum law clinic where, psychiatrists or medical residents and medical students do evaluations for certain cases. Um, if you also, I'm sorry, I'm not, if I don't say your name correctly, Dr. Nazaret. I mean, if you want to email me, I can with the asylum clinic at UT where they do have psychiatrists that are doing evaluations. Okay, how do you vet mental health evaluators who seek to join mental health collaborative? So we um, I wish I had a more of a better answer, but basically, we open up the training for folks that want to join. We do ask them to be licensed. So once they do the training, they have the opportunity to join the collaborative. So they submit their information, including like their licensure number. I go on the board website and I just make sure that they're in good standing with the board, and then they're invited to the collaborative. Uh, this is where, we really do also ask the attorneys to be involved, right? Because we really value their feedback, and I have had a few cases where attorneys have reached out to me after an evaluator has done an evaluation where they have concerns about maybe like language that is being used to refer to clients, or they don't feel that the evaluator has used a trauma-informed lens. And so that's where we really do value the feedback of the legal team, because it gives me, it's not only me doing the review of the letter, right? I'm getting also feedback from somebody else. And then, I can typically what happens, I can reach out to evaluator and say, hey, these concerns came up during the evaluation. How do you feel about, maybe redoing the evaluation? Or there are times, in all transparency that, the attorney has let me know, I don't want to use this evaluation. Can you please connect me to a different evaluator? And that's totally fine. We will do that, right? Because we want to make sure that the letter that is being used is actually going to be helpful for the case. Um, so yeah, I don't have a very you know deep process in vetting people other than making sure they're in good standing, and then just the quality of the work that they submit that fits with the values of the collaborative and what we're trying to do with this program.
Thank you so much, Monica, for answering all